Hello and welcome back, guys. Today we are starting a new story titled, What is Better, Quirks or Science, written by Death12976. Please check the link in the description. And let's start. Chapter 1. The spark of discontent. The vibrant hues of All Might's heroic deeds flashed across the television screen, a dazzling display of power and charisma that usually sent shivers of awe down the spines of most 4-year-olds. In the small, cluttered living room of the Midoriya household, Inko watched with a soft smile as the number one hero effortlessly apprehended a villain with a booming laugh and a signature catchphrase. But beside her, Izuku sat with a furrowed brow, his emerald eyes narrowed in critical observation rather than admiration. "He just punched him," Izuku muttered, his small hands fidgeting with a discarded circuit board he'd salvaged from a broken toy. He didn't even try to analyze the villain's quirk, or the structural integrity of the building they were fighting near. Just pow. He punctuated his statement with a dismissive wave of his hand. Inko chuckled, ruffling his already messy green curls. "That's All Might, sweetie. He's strong and saves everyone with a smile." Izuku sighed, a sound far too world-weary for a child his age. "Strength is important, Mom, I know. But it's not everything. What if the villain had a quirk that couldn't be beaten by just punching? What if the building was unstable and could have collapsed on innocent people? They just rely on their quirks like it solves every single problem." He poked at the circuit board with a small screwdriver, his gaze intense. "It's inefficient. Logically unsound." His mother blinked, a little taken aback by his unusually analytical pronouncements. Most children his age were mimicking All Might's poses and shouting, "Plus ultra." Izuku, on the other hand, seemed more interested in the mechanics of the world around him, constantly taking apart and, sometimes, putting back together anything he could get his hands on. The news report continued, showcasing other heroes in action: a water-manipulating hero extinguishing a fire with a dramatic flourish, a speedster blurring through the streets to catch a purse snatcher, a telekinetic hero levitating debris. With each display of quirk-based heroism, Izuku's frown deepened. "See!" he exclaimed, pointing at the screen as the water hero simply blasted water at the flames. "They're not even considering the chemical composition of the fire. What if it was a grease fire? Water would just make it worse. It's all just brute force and flashy abilities. Where's the strategy? Where's the science?" Inko, though sometimes perplexed by her son's unusual interests, always tried to be supportive. "Well, honey, the heroes are trained professionals. They know what they're doing." "But how do they know?" Izuku persisted, his voice rising slightly in frustration. "Do they run experiments? Do they calculate probabilities? Do they develop countermeasures based on rigorous scientific principles? It doesn't look like it. It looks like they just react with their quirks." He threw his hands up in exasperation. "It's like humanity just stopped thinking the moment everyone started getting these quirks." His mind raced, already formulating complex theories about quirk manifestations and their limitations. He saw heroes as one-trick ponies, reliant on their innate abilities without truly understanding the underlying mechanics or exploring alternative solutions. He remembered reading, or rather having his mother read to him, about the great scientific advancements of the past: the development of electricity, the understanding of gravity, the exploration of space. It felt like humanity had been on the cusp of a new era, an era of scientific discovery and interstellar travel, but then quirks had arrived and everyone had become fixated on these genetic lottery tickets, forgetting the power of human intellect and systematic inquiry. The next week was Izuku's 4th birthday, the day when children usually manifested their quirks. He watched his classmates with a detached curiosity, observing the various displays of nascent abilities: a boy who could slightly elongate his fingers, a girl who could make small sparks appear in her palms. Katsuki Bakugo, his childhood friend, or rather tormentor in the making, already boasted a powerful explosion quirk, tiny bursts of controlled detonations erupting from his hands. Bakugo strutted around the playground, basking in the attention, a sneer plastered on his face as he showed off his burgeoning power. "Deku, you still haven't gotten your useless quirk yet." Bakugo sneered, shoving Izuku slightly. "You'll probably get something weak and pathetic just like you." Izuku simply adjusted the imaginary glasses on his nose, a habit he'd picked up from old science documentaries. "Quirks are merely biological anomalies, Kaken. They are interesting from a scientific standpoint, but they are not the sole measure of human potential." Bakugo scoffed, his small explosions crackling louder. "What's that supposed to mean, you quirkless loser?" The word hit Izuku with a strange sense of relief. He hadn't manifested a quirk. While other children his age would be crying and devastated, A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Later that day at the doctor's office, the diagnosis was confirmed. Izuku Midoriya was quirkless. His mother's eyes welled up with tears, a mixture of sadness and worry for her son's future in a quirk-dominated society. "I'm so sorry, Izuku," she sobbed, pulling him into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry." Izuku, however, patted her back reassuringly. "It's all right, Mom." "Really?" In fact, he paused, a spark of excitement igniting in his emerald eyes. "This is fascinating." Inko looked at him bewildered. "Fascinating." "Izuku, you won't be able to become a hero." "Heroes?" Izuku interrupted, his voice filled with a newfound conviction. "Are a temporary phenomenon. A societal crutch. They rely on unpredictable, often illogical abilities instead of systematic understanding and innovation. Humanity was on the verge of unlocking the secrets of the universe. We were close to reaching for the stars. And then quirks. Everyone became obsessed with these genetic mutations, squandering their intellectual potential on flashy powers instead of true progress." He gestured emphatically, his small body buzzing with energy. "Think about it, Mom. All the research, all the resources poured into quirk enhancement and hero support. What if that same effort was directed towards scientific advancement? We could have had flying cars by now. We could have cured diseases. We could have established colonies on the moon." Inko stared at her son, her sadness slowly giving way to confusion. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. But being a hero is a noble goal, Izuku. They save people, they react to problems, Mom," Izuku countered, his voice sharp with intellectual fervor. "They don't solve the underlying issues. They're like glorified firefighters, constantly putting out blazes instead of designing fireproof buildings in the first place. True progress comes from understanding the fundamental laws of the universe and applying that knowledge to improve life for everyone, not just reacting to crises with superpowers." He climbed off the examination table, his small frame radiating an unexpected intensity. "This quirkless diagnosis, it's not a setback, Mom. It's an opportunity. An opportunity to focus on what truly matters. The power of the human mind. The elegance of scientific inquiry. The boundless potential of human ingenuity." He struck a pose, one hand dramatically pointing towards the ceiling. "Let's get excited, Mom. The age of heroes is nearing its end. And the age of science is about to begin." From that day forward, Izuku's obsession with science intensified. While other children played heroes and villains, Izuku could be found in his room surrounded by books on physics, chemistry, astronomy, and engineering. He devoured knowledge with an insatiable hunger, his already sharp mind absorbing complex concepts with astonishing speed. His IQ, initially within the gifted range, seemed to skyrocket as he relentlessly challenged himself, constantly seeking new information and making intricate connections between seemingly disparate fields. His room transformed into a makeshift laboratory, filled with disassembled electronics, half-finished experiments, and stacks of notebooks filled with his meticulous observations and groundbreaking, at least in his 4-year-old mind, theories. He talked to himself constantly, muttering about the inefficiencies of hero society and the glorious potential of a science-driven future. "The reliance on quirks is a fundamental flaw in the current societal structure," he'd murmur, carefully dissecting an old radio. "It creates a system of inherent inequality, where power is arbitrarily distributed based on genetic chance. True equality can only be achieved through knowledge and understanding accessible to all. The heroes think they're protecting us, but they're actually stagnating our progress. 10 billion% sure of it." His interactions with Katsuki Bakugo remained volatile. Bakugo, whose explosive quirk grew stronger with each passing day, continued his relentless bullying, fueled by a mixture of superiority and a strange, almost resentful awareness of Izuku's sharp intellect. "Still playing with your junk, Deku?" Bakugo would sneer, often accompanied by his 2 lackeys. "Why don't you just accept that you're a quirkless nobody? You'll never be a hero." Izuku would often ignore him, his mind lost in some complex equation or theoretical problem. But sometimes he couldn't resist a retort, delivered with an air of detached intellectual superiority that only infuriated Bakugo further. "Heroism, as currently practiced, is a statistically improbable and thermodynamically inefficient method of societal problem-solving, Kaken," Izuku would say, his gaze unwavering. "True progress lies in understanding the fundamental laws of the universe and applying them systematically." Bakugo's response would invariably involve explosions and threats, which Izuku would calmly observe, occasionally making notes on the properties of Bakugo's quirk. The rapid expansion of nitroglycerin-like compounds generated by your quirk appears to exhibit a correlation between emotional state and explosive yield, he'd mumble, much to Bakugu's incandescent rage. Despite the bullying, Izuku remained undeterred. He saw Bakugu and the other quirk-obsessed children as prime examples of the societal stagnation he so vehemently opposed. They were so focused on their innate abilities that they neglected the development of their minds, becoming reliant on brute force rather than strategic thinking. As he grew older, his understanding of the world deepened, and his convictions solidified. He saw the limitations of hero society, the reliance on reactive measures, the lack of long-term solutions, the inherent biases and inequalities created by the quirk system. He devoured news reports, not with admiration for the heroes, but with a critical eye, analyzing their strategies, identifying their flaws, and mentally devising more efficient, science-based solutions. Another building destroyed due to collateral damage, he'd sigh, shaking his head. Imagine if they had utilized structural analysis and targeted energy dispersal techniques. The destruction could have been minimized by at least 8%. These heroes, they lack vision. They lack scientific rigor. He spent hours in libraries, poring over ancient texts and cutting-edge scientific journals, tracing the history of human innovation and marveling at the ingenuity of past generations. He saw a clear trajectory, from early humans using tools and fire to the scientific revolution and the dawn of the space age. Quirks, in his view, were a detour, a fascinating but ultimately limiting evolutionary branch that had distracted humanity from its true potential. We were on the verge of interstellar travel, he'd exclaimed to his bewildered mother. We were unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos. And now, everyone's just worried about who has the biggest explosion or the fastest speed. It's a tragedy. A monumental waste of human potential. His goal became clear, a burning ambition that fueled his relentless pursuit of knowledge. He wouldn't become a hero. He would become a scientist, a revolutionary who would dismantle the outdated and inefficient hero-centric society and usher in a new era, the age of science. He would remind humanity of its intellectual prowess, its capacity for innovation, its destiny among the stars. The age of heroes is drawing to a close, he'd whisper to himself, hunched over a complex diagram of a theoretical energy conduit. Their flashy quirks and short-sighted solutions cannot sustain progress indefinitely. The future belongs to those who understand the fundamental laws of the universe, those who can innovate and create, those who can think. And I, Izuku Midoriya, quirkless wonder and harbinger of a new dawn, I will be the one to light the way. Let's get excited. The scientific revolution is 10 billion% inevitable. His journey had begun, not on a path paved with heroic aspirations, but on a quest for knowledge, driven by a profound belief in the power of the human mind and a resolute determination to reshape the world. The quirkless boy who saw heroes as foolish would one day aim to dismantle their entire system, one scientific breakthrough at a time. The age of heroes might be DMNT now, but in the mind of young Izuku Midoriya, its expiration date was already being calculated. Chapter 2, Blueprints for a New Era. The fluorescent lights of Aldra High School hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the classroom. At 6'2", Izuku Midoriya was a striking figure, his lean build hinting at a surprising underlying strength developed through years of unorthodox experimentation and a self-imposed physical regimen. His silver-streaked dark hair, a permanent memento of a volatile hair dye experiment involving concentrated nitrates and a poorly ventilated bathroom, framed a sharp, intelligent face. His emerald eyes, now even more intense with the accumulation of vast knowledge, scanned the room with an air of detached observation. He sat quietly at his desk, idly sketching complex molecular structures in a worn notebook, oblivious to the chatter of his classmates. The teacher, a portly man with a perpetually tired expression, shuffled into the classroom carrying a stack of papers. "All right, settle down," he droned, placing the papers on his desk with a sigh. "As you all know, you're in your final year. It's time to start thinking seriously about your future. Specifically," he held up the stack of papers, "your post-secondary education. These are your college application forms." A wave of excited murmurs rippled through the class. Quirks flared momentarily, a student's fingers elongated into tendrils, another's skin shimmered with a faint glow. The air crackled with anticipation, the collective dream of heroic futures palpable. The teacher, however, had a mischievous glint in his eye. With a sudden flick of his wrist, he tossed the entire stack of application forms into the air. They fluttered down like useless confetti, landing haphazardly on desks and the floor. "Just kidding," he announced with a wry smile. Let's be real, you all want to be heroes, right? The classroom erupted in cheers and enthusiastic displays of their quirks. The water manipulator from middle school unleashed a small but impressive jet of water. The elongating fingers student stretched his appendages across the aisle, and the sparking girl created miniature lightning bolts that danced between her fingertips. It was a cacophony of youthful ambition and raw power. Amidst the boisterous display, two figures remained conspicuously still. Katsuki Bakugo, now a muscular youth with an ever-present scowl and even more volatile explosions, sat with his arms crossed, a look of arrogant certainty on his face. Beside him, Izuku continued to sketch in his notebook, seemingly unfazed by the commotion. With a sudden, explosive burst, Bakugo launched himself onto his desk, striking a dramatic pose. "Listen up, extras," he roared, his voice laced with characteristic arrogance. "I'm the one who's going to UA. I'll be the #1 hero, surpassing even All Might. You'll all be lucky to even be in the same vicinity as my greatness." The teacher, used to Bakugo's bombastic pronouncements, simply sighed. Yes, Bakugo. We're all aware of your aspirations. Speaking of UA, he consulted his clipboard. Bakugo Katsuki has indeed listed the heroics course as his first choice. No surprises there. He scanned the rest of the list. Now let's see Midoriya. A hush fell over the class. All eyes turned to Izuku, a mixture of curiosity and disdain in their gazes. They knew he was quirkless, an anomaly in their quirk-dominated world. The idea of him even considering UA's heroics course was laughable. Midoriya Izuku, the teacher continued, a slight frown creasing his brow as he read Izuku's application. You've also applied to UA. A collective snicker rippled through the classroom. Bakugo's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed into furious slits. What did you say, Teach? That quirkless Deku thinks he can get into UA's hero course. He's even more pathetic than I thought. He jumped off his desk, explosions crackling in his palms, and stomped towards Izuku. You think you can even stand on the same ground as me, you useless piece of... Before Bakugo could reach him, Izuku subtly shifted in his seat. It was a movement so swift and precise that most of the class missed it entirely. Bakugo stumbled, his foot catching on the leg of Izuku's desk, and he pitched forward, landing in an undignified heap on the floor. Perhaps you should focus on maintaining your center of gravity, Kakin, Izuku said calmly, not even looking up from his notebook. A stable foundation is crucial for any endeavor, even explosive ones. Bakugo roared in frustration, sparks flying from his hands. You think you're so smart, Deku? I'll show you smart. Bakugo. The teacher's voice rose, finally regaining control of the situation. Get back to your seat. Now. Bakugo, still fuming, reluctantly obeyed. The class, however, was now buzzing with a new wave of whispers. Had quirkless Midoriya just dodged Bakugo? Actually, the teacher continued, his eyes scanning Izuku's application again with a newfound curiosity, Midoriya hasn't applied for the heroics course. The murmurs intensified. If not heroics, then what? He's applied for Class 1X. The teacher paused, looking genuinely perplexed. It seems to be a newly established department. The description says, Advanced Studies in Applied Sciences and Engineering. It mentions specialized curricula in physics, chemistry, advanced mathematics, robotics, and even law. He looked up, bewildered. There's no mention of heroics whatsoever. It says the program is designed for individuals seeking careers in scientific research, technological innovation, and legal frameworks supporting scientific advancement. A stunned silence fell over the classroom. This was unheard of. UA, the most prestigious hero academy in the country, offering a program with no hero training. Bakugo's jaw dropped. What the hell is that, Deku? Some kind of loser class for rejects who can't be heroes. Izuku finally looked up, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. One might say it is a class for those who understand that true power comes not from random genetic mutations, but from the systematic application of knowledge and reason, Kakin. A class for those who aim to build the future, not just react to its crises. Build the future. Bakugo scoffed. What a load of CRP. Heroes are the ones who protect the future. Protection is a temporary measure, Kakin, Izuku countered, his voice calm but firm. Innovation is the foundation of lasting progress. The teacher, eager to regain control, cleared his throat. All right, let's not get into philosophical debates. Bakugo, back to your seat. Midoriya's choices are his own. Let's continue with the application reviews. The rest of the class proceeded in a daze. The revelation of Izuku's non-heroic aspirations had thrown their preconceived notions into disarray. Quirkless Midoriya, the boy they had always dismissed as weak and useless, was aiming for a completely different path, one that seemed strangely ambitious in its own way. As the school day drew to a close, Bakugo intercepted Izuku near the school gates, his face a mask of fury. Deku. What the hell is this Class 1X bullshit? You think you're too good for being a hero now, huh? Izuku, who had been reviewing notes on advanced materials science, simply sighed and closed his notebook. My goals lie beyond the limitations of quirk-based heroism, Kaken. While your explosive abilities may be visually impressive, they lack the fundamental understanding necessary for true societal advancement. Bakugo lunged at him, a furious explosion erupting in his palm. I'll show you advancement, you DMN nerd. Izuku, anticipating the attack, took a single step to the side. Bakugo, blinded by rage, stumbled on the uneven pavement and went sprawling, his explosion dissipating harmlessly into the air. Again, Kaken, Izuku said with a hint of exasperation, adjusting his backpack. Stability and controlled application of force are key. Perhaps some foundational physics courses would benefit your explosive tendencies. He stepped over the fallen Bakugo and continued walking, leaving the fuming blonde in his wake. His route home took him under a grimy overpass. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and exhaust fumes. Suddenly, a viscous, black sludge erupted from a nearby sewer drain, coalescing into a grotesque humanoid form. The sludge villain. Haha, a perfect hiding place, the villain gurgled, its eyes scanning for a new host. It spotted Izuku, its slimy tendrils reaching out with alarming speed. You'll do nicely, kid. Panic flared momentarily, but Izuku's mind raced. Direct confrontation with brute force was illogical. He needed a different approach. Remembering a volatile mixture he had been experimenting with, a combination of concentrated citric acid and potassium permanganate, known for its rapid exothermic reaction and production of hot, oxidizing gases, he reached into his backpack. He had been transporting a small, sealed container of the mixture for a controlled experiment later. With a swift movement, he flung the container at the sludge villain. It shattered on impact, the chemicals mixing instantly. A violent fizzing erupted, followed by a burst of hot, purple gas that billowed outwards. The sludge villain shrieked, its form convulsing as the oxidizing gas irritated and burned its gelatinous body. Inefficient life form. Izuku muttered, backing away as the villain writhed in agony. Vulnerable to basic chemical reactions. Predictable. Just as the sludge villain was beginning to regain some semblance of control, a booming voice echoed through the underpass. Have no fear, for I am here. All Might, the symbol of peace, descended with a heroic leap, his signature smile gleaming. He took in the scene, the struggling villain and the unharmed but slightly disheveled Izuku. A villain. And you, young man, you managed to hold him off. All Might exclaimed, impressed. Before Izuku could offer a scientific explanation of his impromptu chemical weapon, All Might delivered a powerful punch, creating a massive gust of wind that dispersed the remaining sludge and knocked the villain unconscious. Thank you for your bravery, young man. All Might boomed, quickly collecting the incapacitated villain into a pair of bottles. You were a great help. Izuku simply nodded, adjusting his backpack. Efficient capture, All Might. Though perhaps a containment unit with a more robust chemical resistance would be advisable for future encounters with this particular type of villain. All Might chuckled, a little taken aback by the analytical observation. Right you are, young man. Stay safe. With a final wave and a powerful jump, the symbol of peace vanished into the sky. Izuku watched him go, a thoughtful expression on his face. Reliance on overwhelming force effective but lacks finesse. And the containment method is rudimentary. He continued his walk home, his mind already dissecting the encounter from a purely scientific perspective. Later that evening, as he walked along the shoreline near his home, he noticed a vast stretch of beach choked with mountains of garbage. Discarded appliances, broken furniture, and tons of plastic waste formed a desolate landscape. Izuku stopped, his eyes widening not in disgust but in analytical interest. Incredible, a veritable treasure trove of raw materials, he murmured, his mind already racing with possibilities. Metals, polymers, ceramics, all just waiting to be repurposed. And the sheer physical exertion required to clear this an excellent opportunity for strength conditioning. He looked out at the polluted expanse, a determined glint in his emerald eyes. The UA practical exam, they want us to bring something to aid in combat. Combat, such a primitive concept. But if they insist on a demonstration of capability, then I shall provide them with a demonstration of ingenuity. I will harness the very waste of this stagnant society to forge the tools of a new era. He clenched his fist, a spark of manic excitement igniting within him. Let's get excited, people. Operation Reclamation and Innovation is about to commence. 10 billion% sure. His high school years, devoid of heroic aspirations but brimming with scientific fervor, had unknowingly prepared him for a challenge far greater than any hero course could offer. He would enter UA not as a hopeful hero but as a budding revolutionary, ready to dismantle the old order and build a future powered by the boundless potential of science. The garbage-strewn beach would become his laboratory, and the practical exam his first grand demonstration. The age of science was indeed on the horizon, and Izuku Midoriya was ready to usher it in. My Hero Academia. The Age of Reason Chapter 3. The Dawn of Innovation. 10 months. 304 days. 7,296 hours. That was the duration of Izuku Midoriya's self-imposed Operation Reclamation and Innovation. The once garbage-choked Dagoba Beach had been transformed. Mountains of refuse had been meticulously sorted, analyzed for their material properties, and either processed for reuse or neatly organized for future projects. Izuku's physique had undergone a similar transformation. The constant lifting, hauling, and manipulation of heavy scrap had sculpted his lean frame into one possessing surprising strength and endurance, belying his studious appearance. During his rigorous beach cleaning and invention phase, Izuku had an unexpected encounter. A gaunt, skeletal man with hollowed cheeks and sunken eyes had stumbled upon him one evening, wheezing and clutching his chest. The man introduced himself as Toshinori Yagi. Despite his frail appearance, there was a strange air of familiarity about him, a shadow of a powerful presence. Izuku, ever the pragmatist, had assessed his condition, noting the signs of severe physical strain. He had offered Toshinori water and helped him find a less strenuous path off the beach. Their paths crossed a few more times during Izuku's cleanup efforts, their conversations ranging from the mundane to surprisingly insightful discussions about the state of hero society. Toshinori's views were surprisingly cynical for someone who seemed like a civilian. Izuku never made the connection to the towering figure of All Might, the skeletal man's true identity hidden beneath a veneer of frailty. The day of the UA entrance exams arrived, crisp and bright. The towering gates of the Hero Academy loomed before Izuku, a symbol of the very system he aimed to reform. He carried a large, metallic trunk, its contents the culmination of his 10 months of tireless work. As he approached the entrance, he spotted a familiar head of spiky blonde hair. Katsuki Bakugo stood amidst a throng of nervous applicants, his usual sneer firmly in place. As Izuku walked past, Bakugo deliberately shouldered him. Or rather, he tried to. The impact was akin to a small car colliding with a sturdy oak tree. Bakugo, all 5'7" of explosive fury, bounced harmlessly off Izuku's 6'2" frame, stumbling slightly. "Watch where you're going, Deku." Bakugo snarled, regaining his balance and glaring up at Izuku. Izuku, unfazed, simply adjusted the strap of his trunk. "My apologies, Kaken. Your trajectory was unexpected." He continued towards the entrance, leaving a sputtering Bakugo behind. Inside the sprawling UA campus, applicants were directed to various testing areas. Izuku followed the signs for the Class 1X examination hall. As he stepped into the designated room, his eyebrows rose slightly. It was a spacious lecture hall, equipped with individual desks and advanced testing equipment. However, it was completely empty. He was the only applicant. A proctor, a stern-looking woman with short, practical hair, entered the room carrying a stack of papers. "Midoriya Izuku," she confirmed, her voice crisp. "Yes, ma'am," Izuku replied, placing his trunk beside a desk in the front row. "You are the sole applicant for the Advanced Studies in Applied Sciences and Engineering program," she stated, her gaze scrutinizing him. "This examination will assess your theoretical knowledge across a range of scientific and legal disciplines. You have 2 hours." She placed a thick booklet and a stylus on his desk. "Begin." Izuku surveyed the exam. It covered topics ranging from quantum mechanics and organic chemistry to patent law and ethical considerations in scientific research. For most high school students, it would be an insurmountable challenge. For Izuku, it was STMLTNG. He dove into the questions, his mind a whirlwind of equations, theorems, and legal precedents. He scribbled furiously, his pen flying across the pages, his understanding of the subjects far exceeding the expected level for a high school graduate. 20 minutes later, the proctor looked up in surprise as Izuku approached her desk with the completed exam. She took the booklet, her expression incredulous. You finished already?" she asked, flipping through the densely filled pages. Her eyes widened as she scanned his meticulously detailed answers. "This is remarkable. Your understanding of these concepts is advanced." The material was logically structured and presented no significant conceptual obstacles, Izuku stated matter-of-factly. The proctor, still slightly stunned, directed him to a waiting area where he would receive instructions for the practical exam. Later, in a large auditorium filled with nervous applicants for the heroics course, the practical exam was explained via a large screen projection. Present Mick's booming voice filled the room, outlining the objective: to earn points by disabling villainous robots in a simulated cityscape. He also warned them about a massive, zero-point robot that was essentially an obstacle. Amidst the sea of hopeful heroes, Izuku spotted the blue-haired boy from the entrance, vehemently protesting the inclusion of the zero-pointer, deeming it an unfair obstacle. Izuku filed the observation away, noting the boy's rigid adherence to rules and his apparent lack of adaptability. Finally, the applicants were divided into different battle centers, simulated cityscapes designed for the practical exam. Izuku was assigned to a sector far from Bakugo. As he stood at the starting line, he opened his trunk. From within, he began to assemble his creation. The result was a marvel of repurposed technology. Using scavenged metals, salvaged wiring, and components from discarded electronics, Izuku had constructed a sophisticated exoskeleton. It was a sleek, matte black harness that fit snugly around his torso and limbs. 4 articulated robotic arms extended from his back, each ending in a multi-jointed hand. Integrated into the forearms of both his natural arms and the robotic appendages were compact, high-powered laser emitters, their lenses gleaming menacingly. The entire system was powered by a series of high-capacity batteries he had salvaged and meticulously refurbished. As Present Mick's voice boomed, "Go!" Izuku didn't hesitate. While other applicants charged forward using their quirks, Izuku activated his exoskeleton. With a quiet whirring sound, the robotic arms sprang to life, mirroring his movements with uncanny precision. He bolted forward, his enhanced strength and the added limbs providing surprising speed and agility. The cityscape was soon filled with the sounds of explosions, elemental attacks, and the metallic clanging of robots being disabled. Izuku moved with calculated efficiency. He didn't engage in unnecessary brawling. Instead, he used his enhanced senses and processing power, his own intellect augmented by the rudimentary onboard computer of his device, to identify the weak points of the robots. With precise laser blasts from both his natural arms and the robotic appendages, he systematically disabled the mechanical villains, targeting joints, power cores and sensor arrays. He also observed other applicants. Many relied solely on the raw power of their quirks, often causing significant collateral damage. Some struggled against multiple opponents, their abilities ill-suited for crowd control. Izuku, with his array of laser emitters and the versatility of his 4 extra arms, could engage multiple targets simultaneously with controlled bursts of energy. He noticed a flash of purple hair struggling against a group of 2-point robots. The boy, Shinso, seemed to be relying on some form of verbal manipulation, which was ineffective against the non-sentient machines. With a swift movement, Izuku detached one of the smaller laser blasters from his robotic arm and, using another arm, expertly tossed it to Shinso. "Here," Izuku called out. "Utilize directed energy bursts. Target their locomotion systems." Shinso, surprised but quick-thinking, caught the device. After a moment of bewildered inspection, he aimed and fired, successfully disabling a robot. A look of surprised gratitude flashed across his face. Suddenly, a ground-shaking tremor announced the arrival of the zero-point robot. The colossal machine lumbered through the cityscape, its sheer size and destructive potential causing panic among the applicants. Many turned and fled, their focus shifting from gaining points to simply surviving. Izuku, however, didn't flinch. He analyzed the massive robot, his enhanced vision picking out structural weak points and potential sensor locations. He also noticed a brunette girl with a gravity-manipulating quirk caught beneath a pile of rubble, seemingly frozen in fear as the zero-pointer approached. As the massive robot drew closer, Izuku overheard the brunette girl muttering to herself, her voice laced with desperation. "If I throw myself in front of it and get hurt, maybe I can sue UA for negligence and still get in," Izuku's internal processor's word. Her logic was flawed, her plan reckless and opportunistic. More importantly, it was inefficient. Just as the girl was about to propel herself towards the towering machine, Izuku's robotic arm shot out with surprising speed and strength, clamping firmly but gently around her torso, pulling her back. That is a statistically improbable and ethically questionable course of action, Izuku stated calmly, his robotic arm holding her securely. Furthermore, it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of risk assessment and legal proceedings. Before the girl could respond, a loud siren blared, signaling the end of the practical exam. The 0-point robot lumbered to a halt. Moments later, in a separate observation room overlooking the battle centers, the UA staff watched the recorded feeds with a mixture of astonishment and intrigue. Nizu, the principal, a small, intelligent creature with a perpetual smile, leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the footage of Izuku Midoriya. Well, Nizu mused, his voice sharp and insightful. It seems our Class 1X applicant is quite unconventional. Eraserhead, his usual tired expression even more pronounced, watched the footage of Izuku's efficient takedowns. His control over those devices is impressive. And his analysis of the robot's weaknesses was spot on. Midnight, her playful demeanor slightly subdued, was intrigued by Izuku's appearance and his unique approach. He certainly stands out. That gear, it's like nothing I've ever seen. All Might, in his skeletal form as Toshinori Yagi, watched with a flicker of recognition in his hollow eyes. He remembered the earnest young man from the beach. The feed switched to Izuku's interaction with Shinso. Cementos, a hero with the power to manipulate concrete, commented, giving his weapon to another examinee. That's unexpected. Not exactly a heroic act focused on self-preservation. Nizu chuckled. Perhaps it was an act of strategic resource allocation. Or perhaps an experiment in externalizing his capabilities. Then the feed showed the 0-pointer approaching the brunette girl, and Izuku's robotic arm intervening. The audio picked up her muttered plan. Did she just say she was going to intentionally injure herself to sue UA? Present Mike exclaimed, his voice incredulous. Recovery girl, the school nurse, shook her head in disapproval. That's concerning. A complete lack of regard for her own well-being and a blatant attempt to exploit the system. Just then a staff member entered the observation room carrying a data chip. Principal Nizu, we have the results of the written exam for Class 1X applicant Midoriya Izuku. Nizu took the chip and plugged it into a nearby monitor. The screen displayed Izuku's score, a perfect 100%. The staff members exchanged stunned glances. A perfect score. Eraserhead muttered, a hint of surprise in his voice. In that advanced curriculum. Indeed, Nizu chirped. His theoretical understanding is exceptional. A moment later, another staff member rushed in. Principal, we have security footage from the entrance. Midoriya-kun dropped off a data chip before leaving the campus. Nizu raised an eyebrow. Let's see it. The footage showed Izuku approaching a security terminal, inserting a data chip and then walking away. The staff played the contents of the chip. It was an audio recording. The conversation between the brunette girl and herself about her plan to feign injury. A minute later, the security cameras captured the brunette girl approaching the same terminal, her expression indignant. Excuse me. I demand to know the points that green-haired boy got for the practical exam. Yelled. Me back. I could have gotten more points if he hadn't interfered. You should give me his points. The UA staff in the observation room exchanged knowing glances. Well, that certainly clarifies her motivations, Midnight said dryly. Nizu smiled, a hint of something sharp in his eyes. Indeed. It seems Midoriya-kun is not only intelligent but also perceptive. The staff reviewed the brunette girl's practical exam score. It was abysmal. Her attempts to gain points had been clumsy and ineffective. Finally, Nizu accessed Izuku's application file. He scrolled down to the personal statements section. One particular quote stood out, underlined and bolded, "The age of heroes will end soon, and the age of science will start again." A profound silence fell over the observation room. The implications of the quirkless boy's words hung heavy in the air. Nizu chuckled softly. It seems our sole applicant for Class 1X has a rather ambitious vision for the future. He tapped his chin thoughtfully. I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting at UA. Chapter 4. The solitary science student Izuku's modest apartment, a testament to his focused priorities, was a sanctuary of organized chaos. Bookshelves overflowed with scientific texts, diagrams covered the walls, and various half-finished contraptions sat on every available surface. He paced the small living room, his long legs eating up the limited space, a tangible air of anticipation surrounding him. The letter from UA was due any day now, the culmination of years of focused study and his unconventional performance in the entrance exams. His mind, never truly at rest, cycled through the possibilities. Acceptance was, logically speaking, highly probable given his perfect written score and his performance in the practical exam. Yet, the unique nature of his application for the newly established Class 1X introduced a significant variable: the unknown. Class 1X dorms, he murmured to himself, adjusting a pair of safety goggles perched precariously on his silver-streaked hair. Given that I am, statistically speaking, the entirety of the student body, the concept of dorms becomes somewhat paradoxical. Will I be assigned a solitary suite? Or will UA attempt some form of interdepartmental cohabitation? The logistical and social implications of the latter are intriguing, though potentially disruptive to focused research. He paused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Sharing a living space with a heroics student, the potential for ideological clashes regarding the efficacy of quirk-based solutions versus scientific methodology is considerable. Imagine the debates regarding optimal projectile velocity or the structural integrity of villain-constructed obstacles. A small, almost mischievous grin flickered across his face. The possibilities for enlightening discussions are substantial. His thoughts then drifted to the vast repository of human knowledge that predated the widespread emergence of quirks. He had recently stumbled upon historical records detailing humanity's remarkable achievements in genetic engineering and species revival. The fact that humans had successfully brought back creatures like the dire wolf from extinction was astounding, a testament to the power of scientific understanding and manipulation of biological systems. To think, he mused, his emerald eyes wide with fascination, that humanity possessed such mastery over genetics even before the advent of these quirks. And yet, with the rise of these inherent abilities, that scientific focus seems to have waned. A societal shift in priorities, a fascination with the immediate power of quirks overshadowing the long-term potential of scientific advancement. It's a perplexing inefficiency. The next day, as if summoned by his anticipation, a crisp white envelope bearing the UA seal arrived. Izuku's hand trembled slightly as he took it. He carefully slit the seal and extracted the contents, a formal letter and a thin, circular disc. The letter contained standard congratulatory remarks and a list of required materials. However, a separate handwritten note caught his eye. Midoriya-kun, given the nature of Class 1X and the practical work involved, we advise against purchasing the standard UA uniform at this time. Please arrive in clothing suitable for potentially messy and chemically intensive activities. We look forward to welcoming you. Sincerely, Nizu. Izuku's lips quirked into a smile. Pragmatic. Efficient. I approve. He then turned his attention to the disc. As he pressed a small button on its surface, a holographic image flickered to life, projecting a familiar, albeit slightly smaller, figure: All Might. Young Midoriya. All Might's booming voice echoed in the small apartment, albeit in a digitized form. Congratulations on your outstanding performance in the UA entrance exams. The hologram shifted to display Izuku's scores. For the written exam, 100%. 4 villain points in the practical exam, and then a separate category, hero points, total, 138 points. Your theoretical knowledge is truly exceptional, young Midoriya. All Might continued, his holographic smile beaming. And your actions during the practical exam, while perhaps unconventional in their direct combat application, demonstrated a commendable level of strategic thinking and a genuine longing to assist your fellow examinees. Your rescue of young Yaoyorozu from the falling debris and your aid to Shinso were noted and factored into your score. A true hero acts not only for themselves but for the well-being of others. Izuku blinked, slightly surprised by the praise for his hero points. His primary motivation had been logical efficiency and minimizing potential casualties, but the positive acknowledgement was not unwelcome. Therefore, All Might announced with a flourish, "We are proud to inform you that you have not only been accepted into high school but you achieved the highest overall score in the entire entrance exam. Welcome to Class 1X." A triumphant grin spread across Izuku's face. Excellent. The first step in the scientific revolution has been successfully executed. The holographic All Might then detailed the next steps, including orientation and move-in day for the dormitories, in 2 days. Izuku immediately began preparations. His packing was less about clothes and personal effects and more about organizing his research notes, scientific equipment, scaled-down versions of his larger projects, and a carefully curated selection of chemicals and materials. He surveyed his attire, recalling Nizu's advice. The standard UA uniform, with its crisp lines and formal appearance, was indeed ill-suited for the kind of work he envisioned. He decided on a set of durable, dark pants, a plain blue long-sleeved shirt made of a stain-resistant synthetic fabric, and his sturdy, reinforced sneakers. Over this, he planned to wear a modified lab coat he had stitched himself, complete with numerous pockets for tools and samples. This ensemble, he reasoned, struck the perfect balance between practicality and a subtle air of scientific authority. As he packed, his mind raced with the possibilities that awaited him at UA. A dedicated laboratory space. Access to advanced scientific equipment. The potential to interact with and perhaps subtly influence the future heroes of Japan. The prospect was exhilarating. The UA dorms for Class 1X, he mused, carefully placing a set of miniature distillation apparatus into a reinforced case. Even if it is a solitary living space, it represents a strategic foothold within the very heart of hero society. A base of operations from which to disseminate the principles of scientific reasoning and technological innovation. He imagined the reactions of the heroic students to his arrival, a lone figure amidst their boisterous, quirk-fueled camaraderie. Would they be curious, dismissive, hostile? Regardless, Izuku was prepared. He had his intellect, his inventions, and an unwavering belief in the eventual triumph of science. With his preparations complete, Izuku surveyed his packed belongings. He was ready. Ready to enter the lion's den not as a lamb but as a catalyst for change. The age of heroes might still be dim, but within the walls of UA, the seeds of a scientific revolution were about to be sown by its first, and for now, only student of Class 1X. "Let's get excited, people," he declared to the empty apartment, a wide, almost manic grin stretching across his face. "The next stage of the experiment is about to begin. 10 billion% sure." Chapter 5. A scientific declaration. The train ride to UA was a blur of calculations and theoretical musings for Izuku. He mentally reviewed his notes on advanced robotics and the potential applications of his exoskeleton in various scientific fields. The other passengers, mostly students heading to their respective high schools, gave him curious glances, intrigued by his tall stature and the self-designed lab coat he wore. Upon arriving at the sprawling UA campus, Izuku consulted the map provided in his acceptance package. The Class 1X dormitory building was located in a quieter section, slightly separated from the more bustling Heroics dorms. As he walked towards it, his unique attire drew more than a few stares from students milling about. Heroics applicants, easily identifiable by their athletic builds and confident strides, eyed him with a mixture of confusion and mild disdain. Support Corps students, with their tool belts and inventive gadgets, seemed more curious, some even offering tentative nods of acknowledgement. The Class 1X dorm building was indeed a solitary structure, a modern two-story building that looked newly constructed. Izuku entered the main hall to find it completely empty. A sense of quiet anticipation filled the air. He found a directory near the entrance and located the room designated for him, a spacious suite on the second floor. The room was significantly larger than his apartment, comprising a combined living and study area, a separate bedroom, and a private laboratory space equipped with basic but functional scientific apparatus. A wide window offered a view of the UA grounds. Izuku surveyed his new domain with satisfaction. "Ample workspace," he murmured, placing his trunk in the center of the room. "Sufficient ventilation in the laboratory. The structural integrity appears sound. Logistically optimal." Over the next few hours, Izuku efficiently unpacked and organized his belongings. Bookshelves were ekted and filled, his experimental equipment was meticulously arranged in the lab, and his living space took on a familiar air of organized scientific inquiry. By late afternoon, his Class 1X dorm room had been transformed into a functional research outpost, complete with diagrams on the walls and the faint scent of various chemicals hanging in the air. Content with his setup, Izuku decided to take a walk and familiarize himself with the campus. He strolled outside, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grounds. As he passed by one of the larger, more boisterous dormitory buildings, the unmistakable sound of energetic chatter and quirk demonstrations drifted out. He recognized it as the Hero Course dorms. As he walked closer, a figure with rigid posture and choppy blue hair emerged, his glasses glinting in the sunlight. It was the boy from the entrance exam, Ida. He spotted Izuku and his eyes widened in what appeared to be disapproval. "You there?" Ida called out, his voice loud and accusatory. "You are a student of UA, are you not? Why are you not wearing the proper uniform? This is a place of discipline and order. Your lack of adherence to regulations is unacceptable. Izuku stopped, turning to face Ida with a neutral expression. My acceptance letter specifically advised against purchasing the standard uniform due to the nature of my studies in Class 1X. My attire is practical and suitable for scientific experimentation, as per the instructions I received. Ida's brow furrowed. Class 1X. I was unaware of such a class. What kind of undisciplined curriculum would exempt a student from the mandatory uniform? He made a series of sharp chopping motions with his hand. Regulations are in place for a reason. They instill a sense of unity and professionalism. Before Izuku could offer a detailed explanation of the principles of specialized vocational attire, a voice drawled from behind Ida. Chill out, Ida. He's probably got a good reason. Not everyone here's aiming to be a flashy hero, you know. Aizawa Shota, his perpetually tired eyes half closed, stood leaning against the doorway of the hero dorms. He glanced at Izuku's lab coat. He's telling the truth. Class 1X has a different focus. Lay off him. Ida's rigid posture softened slightly, though his disapproval remained evident. Aizawa-sensei. I was merely attempting to ensure that all students adhere to the standards of UA. Aizawa sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Just be quiet, Ida. Some of us are trying to nap before patrol. He turned and disappeared back into the dorm building. Ida, though still looking perplexed, refrained from further reprimands. Izuku nodded curtly and continued his walk. A little further along, near a quieter building, he saw a familiar figure with tired purple eyes leaning against a wall. It was Shinso, the boy he had assisted during the practical exam. Shinso looked up, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Hey, you're that weird gear guy from the exam. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Thanks for the blaster, by the way. Actually helped me take down a few more of those clunky robots. Efficient energy projection can often compensate for a lack of direct physical enhancement, Izuku replied, his own lips curving into a rare, genuine smile. My analysis indicated that your quirk was more suited for indirect engagement. They fell into conversation, discovering a shared appreciation for logical reasoning and a certain skepticism towards the more flamboyant aspects of hero society. Shinso, now a student in Class 1A, having surprisingly scored higher than expected, likely due to Izuku's unintentional assistance, expressed his own frustrations with the hero course's emphasis on flashy quirks over strategic thinking. As they talked, the door to the 1A dorm building slid open, and several students emerged, drawn by Shinso's conversation. Among them were a spiky-haired redhead, a cheerful-looking brunette with round cheeks, a serious-looking girl with a creation quirk, and a few others Izuku vaguely remembered from the entrance exam. Bakugo was conspicuously absent. Who's this Shinso? The redhead asked, his grin wide and friendly. This is Midoriya, Shinso replied. He was in the practical exam. He helped me out. Curious eyes turned to Izuku and his lab coat. What's with the getup? The brunette girl asked, tilting her head. Are you in the support course? I am enrolled in Class 1X, Advanced Studies in Applied Sciences and Engineering, Izuku stated, his voice clear and matter-of-fact. Class 1X. The creation quirk girl Yaoyorozu Momo repeated, her brow furrowed in thought. I haven't heard of such a class. It is a newly established program, Izuku explained. My focus is not on heroics, nor on direct support for heroes. My aim is to advance the scientific understanding of the world and to develop technologies that will benefit society as a whole. So you're not going to be a hero? The redhead asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. Izuku's gaze swept over the group, his emerald eyes unwavering. The age of heroes as it currently exists is a paradigm nearing its expiration date. It is a system predicated on unpredictable, often illogical abilities, leading to a CYCL of reactive measures rather than proactive solutions. My goal is to usher in a new era, the age of science. A stunned silence fell over the group. They exchanged bewildered glances. The age of science, the brunette girl repeated, clearly confused. What's that supposed to mean? Izuku sighed, a familiar frustration creeping into his voice. Consider the state of the world before the widespread manifestation of quirks. Humanity stood on the precipice of interstellar colonization. We possessed the technology to manipulate genetics, to revive extinct species. Yet with the advent of quirks, all focus shifted. Resources, research, societal priorities, all diverted towards the amplification and application of these random mutations. He gestured emphatically. It is akin to a primate on the verge of crafting a sophisticated stone tool being distracted by a shiny, ultimately useless pebble. The potential for true progress, for understanding the fundamental laws of the universe and applying that knowledge for the betterment of all, has been stagnated. Momo, her intelligent mind quickly grasping the essence of Izuku's argument, stepped forward. What Midoriya-kun is saying is that he believes humanity's focus on quirks has overshadowed the potential of scientific advancement. He sees the reliance on inherent abilities as a distraction from the systematic development of knowledge and technology that could lead to more profound and lasting societal improvements. The simpler explanation seemed to resonate with some of the students, though confusion still lingered. "So you think quirks are bad?" the redhead asked, his enthusiasm slightly dampened. "Quirks are a biological phenomenon worthy of scientific study," Izuku clarified. "However, the societal obsession with them, the near-exclusive focus on their application for combat and superficial displays of power, has led to a neglect of fundamental scientific inquiry and technological innovation." He paused, his gaze intense. "The CYCL of hero versus villain is a self-perpetuating one. Quirks clash, destruction ensues, heroes react. It is a constant state of damage control, not genuine progress. Science, on the other hand, offers the potential for true solutions, for preventative measures, for advancements that transcend the limitations of individual quirks." Aizawa, who had apparently been eavesdropping from the doorway, stepped forward again. "He's got a point. The reliance on quirks can make people complacent. They forget the importance of critical thinking and problem-solving without relying on inherent powers." Just then, a shrill voice echoed from nearby. "Hey, you're that weirdo who held me back during the exam." The brunette girl from the practical exam, Uraraka Achiko, stomped towards the group, her cheeks flushed with indignation. "You cost me points, you know. I was going to show that zero-pointer what for," she exclaimed, pointing an accusing finger at Izuku. Izuku blinked, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Your plan to deliberately injure yourself in order to initiate legal action against UA was illogical and inefficient. Furthermore, my intervention did not negatively impact your ability to accrue points through conventional means, had you chosen to engage the other robotic entities effectively." Uraraka's jaw dropped. How did you know about that?" Before Izuku could elaborate, Shinso stepped forward, a sardonic smile on his face. "Maybe because some of us were actually trying to pass the exam based on merit, not by trying to scam the system." The other 1A students looked at Uraraka with varying degrees of surprise and disapproval. Izuku, meanwhile, had already lost interest in the petty squabble. His mind was racing with the implications of Aizawa's unexpected agreement and the potential for collaboration with Shinso, who seemed to possess a similar intellectual curiosity. "Fascinating," he murmured to himself, adjusting his lab coat. "An unexpected ally within the heroics department. And further evidence of the flawed logic prevalent within the general education populace." The day had been a whirlwind of introductions and ideological clashes. Izuku Midoriya, the sole student of Class 1X, had made his presence known, not with a heroic declaration but with a scientific manifesto. The age of heroes might still reign supreme at UA, but the seeds of a new era had been sown, and in the quiet solitude of his laboratory dorm, Izuku was already hard at work, preparing for the scientific revolution he was 10 billion% sure was coming. Chapter 6. The Singular Science Section. The first day of school at UA dawned bright and clear, a symbol of new beginnings for the hundreds of aspiring heroes and support specialists. For Izuku, however, it was the commencement of a meticulously planned paradigm shift. He arrived at the designated time for Class 1X homeroom, a room that, much like his dorm, exuded an air of newness and quiet anticipation. Stepping inside, Izuku's eyebrows rose in mild surprise. Behind the teacher's desk sat Principal Nizu, sipping from a delicate-looking teacup. The principal's ever-present smile seemed a touch wider than usual, as if he were privy to some grand, amusing secret. "Ah, Midoriya-kun. Welcome, welcome." Nizu chirped, his voice surprisingly deep for his small stature. "Please take a seat. You're right on time. Punctuality is a virtue, especially in the pursuit of scientific rigor." Izuku nodded, placing his backpack beside a desk in the front row. He was, as expected, the only student present. The realization of his singular status in Class 1X solidified the unique path he had chosen. "Principal Nizu," Izuku began, his tone analytical, "given that I am the sole member of Class 1X, what will be the structure of our homeroom sessions? Will there be a modified curriculum, or will I be integrated into another class for certain subjects? Nizu chuckled, placing his teacup down with a gentle clink. An excellent question, Midoriya-kun. Efficient and directly relevant. For homeroom, it will primarily be just you and I. Think of it as personalized guidance. We will discuss your progress, address any logistical challenges you may encounter, and perhaps engage in STMLTNG intellectual discourse. His eyes twinkled. I have a feeling our conversations will be most enlightening. Izuku considered this. One-on-one sessions with the principal of UA. It was an unexpected development, but one that held significant potential for accessing resources and influencing the school's administration. I see, Izuku replied, a hint of intrigue in his voice. That arrangement could indeed prove beneficial for the efficient pursuit of my academic and long-term objectives. Just then, a frantic knocking echoed from the door. Before either Izuku or Nizu could respond, the door slid open to reveal a disheveled Aizawa, his capture weapon askew and his hair sticking up at odd angles. Principal. Aizawa groaned, his usual air of weary resignation amplified tenfold. That problem child from Gen Ed Uraraka. She's causing a scene at the orientation hall. Something about wanting Midoriya's exam points. He rubbed his temples as if battling a severe headache. I tried to expel her on the spot for the sheer audacity, but Vlad King talked me down. Nizu's smile remained unfazed. Ah, young Uraraka. It seems her entrepreneurial spirit extends beyond manipulating gravity. Don't worry, Aizawa-kun. Security is handling the situation. It seems her outburst was quite disruptive. Izuku raised an eyebrow, a flicker of scientific curiosity in his gaze. Her persistence in this matter is illogical. The allocation of entrance exam points is a finite and immutable system. Her attempts to retroactively acquire points she did not earn demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of resource management and competitive assessment. Aizawa shot Izuku a tired but slightly impressed look. You've only been here for 10 minutes, kid, and you've already grasped the level of irrationality we deal with on a daily basis. Irrationality is a significant impediment to progress, Izuku stated matter-of-factly. It introduces unpredictable variables and skews logical decision-making processes. Nizu chuckled again. Indeed, Midoriya-kun. A perspective I wholeheartedly share. Now, shall we proceed with a brief overview of your unique curriculum? Before Nizu could elaborate, a school-wide announcement crackled over the intercom, requesting all first-year students to proceed to the main orientation hall. Ah, perfect timing. Nizu exclaimed, hopping off his desk. Shall we, Midoriya-kun? It's time for you to be formally introduced to the UA experience, in all its chaotic glory. Izuku followed Nizu out of the homeroom and towards the massive gymnasium where the orientation ceremony was being held. The sheer number of students gathered was statistically significant. He observed the various cliques forming, the boisterous heroic students, the focused support course applicants with their unique gadgets, the more reserved business course students, and the large contingent of general education students. Notably absent was Class 1A. Izuku made a mental note of this. Perhaps their rigorous training already necessitated a different schedule. As Nizu took the stage, a hush fell over the gymnasium. He began with a welcoming address, his tone both jovial and authoritative, outlining the history and philosophy of UA High School. He then proceeded to introduce the faculty, each teacher receiving polite applause. When he reached the heroics department, the cheers were the loudest, especially for All Might, who stood tall and beaming despite his recent encounter with Izuku. Izuku observed the symbol of peace with a detached analytical gaze, noting the subtle signs of lingering strain that most others seemed to miss. Then came the support course teachers, their innovative creations eliciting gasps of admiration. The business course instructors were introduced with a focus on their crucial role in the hero industry's infrastructure. Finally, Nizu's tone shifted slightly as he addressed the general education students. And now, Nizu announced, his gaze sweeping across the assembled students, we come to a new and rather unique addition to UA's academic offerings, the Advanced Studies in Applied Sciences and Engineering program, also known as Class 1X. A ripple of curiosity spread through the gymnasium. Nizu's eyes twinkled as he continued. This specialized curriculum is designed for students with a particular aptitude for scientific inquiry, technological innovation, and the legal frameworks that govern them. Oddly enough, he paused, a mischievous smile playing on his lips, we currently have only one student enrolled in this pioneering class, Midoriya Izuku. A murmur of surprise and confusion filled the hall. All eyes turned towards Izuku, who stood calmly amidst the crowd, his lab coat making him instantly recognizable. Nizu continued, his voice regaining its formal tone. However, for any general education students who find themselves drawn to the rigorous and rewarding pursuit of scientific knowledge, there will be an opportunity to transfer to Class 1X based on exceptional performance in the midterm examinations. The standards, I assure you, will be demanding. He then addressed the matter of attire. You may have noticed that Midoriya-kun is not wearing the standard UA uniform. This is intentional. The curriculum of Class 1X will involve a significant amount of, shall we say, hands-on experimentation. Projects involving potentially messy and chemically intensive procedures will be commonplace. Therefore, investing in a uniform that would likely be rendered unusable within the first week would be fiscally irresponsible. As Nizu finished his explanation, a familiar, irate voice cut through the murmuring crowd. That's not fair. All heads turned to see Uraraka standing in the general education section, her face flushed with anger. Why does he get to wear whatever he wants? He probably cheated on the exam. He doesn't deserve to be here. Security personnel immediately moved towards her, but Uraraka continued her outburst. He held me back during the practical. He stole my points. He should be expelled. The gymnasium fell silent, all eyes fixed on the escalating drama. Izuku simply observed Uraraka's outburst with a detached air, his mind analyzing the emotional and logical inconsistencies in her tirade. Her emotional response is disproportionate to the perceived injustice, he murmured to himself. Her accusations lack factual basis and demonstrate a continued failure to accept personal responsibility for her performance. Despite the efforts of the security guards, Uraraka continued to yell, her voice rising in pitch until it became a near shriek. Accusations and demands for Izuku's expulsion filled the air, disrupting the orientation ceremony entirely. Nizu, his smile never faltering, simply raised a paw. Security, please escort Ms. Uraraka out of the gymnasium. Her disruptive behavior is counterproductive to the spirit of UA. Uraraka was eventually led away, still protesting loudly, leaving an awkward silence in her wake. Nizu cleared his throat. Well, that was certainly spirited. As I was saying, he smoothly transitioned back into his speech, continuing with the introduction of the remaining departments and important school regulations, as if the dramatic interruption had been a mere footnote. Izuku, however, couldn't shake the feeling that his presence at UA was already stirring the pot in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. The blatant hostility from someone he had arguably assisted was a data point worth analyzing. The orientation concluded without further incident. As the students began to disperse, Izuku found himself approached by Shinso. Quite the welcoming committee, Shinso commented dryly, a hint of amusement in his voice. Seems like you've already made an impression. Her emotional volatility and illogical reasoning are noteworthy, Izuku replied, his gaze still fixed on the direction Uraraka had been escorted. It highlights a potential deficiency in the critical thinking skills of some general education students. Yeah, well, try telling her that, Shinso chuckled. Anyway, you heading back to your solitary dorm? Indeed, Izuku replied. I have several theoretical models I wish to refine. Maybe I'll swing by later. Shinso offered. We could discuss the flaws in the hero-centric curriculum. A rare smile touched Izuku's lips. That would be logically sound. As Izuku walked back to the Class 1X dorm building, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. His first day had been anything but ordinary. He was the sole student in a brand new, unconventional program. He had already attracted the ire of a general education student and found a potential intellectual ally in a heroics applicant. And his homeroom teacher was the principal of UA himself. The age of heroes might still be the DMNT ideology at UA, but within the quiet confines of the Class 1X dorm, the gears of scientific revolution were already turning, driven by the singular ambition and intellect of Izuku Midoriya. The experiment had begun, and the results, he was 10 billion% sure, would be groundbreaking. Chapter 7. An invitation and a declaration. Later that evening, as Izuku was immersed in the intricate schematics of a miniature electromagnetic levitation device, a knock echoed on his door. He opened it to find Shinso leaning against the frame, a casual air about him that contrasted with his earlier guarded demeanor. Hey, Shinso said, nodding towards the hallway. Figured you might be getting a little stir-crazy in your science sanctuary. Some of us in 1A were thinking of hanging out in our common room. You want to join? Izuku paused, considering the invitation. Social interaction with the heroic students presented both opportunities and potential pitfalls. It could be a chance to subtly introduce his ideas and gauge their reactions, but also a risk of unnecessary conflict or misunderstanding. Logistically, Izuku began adjusting his goggles. Engaging with a larger sample group could provide valuable data on the prevailing attitudes towards scientific advancement within the hero track demographic. Furthermore, collaborative discussions might yield unforeseen insights. Therefore, a small smile touched his lips. Your proposition is acceptable. Shinso raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes. All right then, acceptable. Lead the way, science guy. As they walked towards the 1A dorm building, the sounds of boisterous laughter and energetic chatter grew louder. Izuku observed the vibrant atmosphere with a detached curiosity, a stark contrast to the quiet solitude of his own dorm. Upon entering the 1A common room, Izuku was greeted by a wave of curious gazes. The room was a colorful explosion of teenage energy, with mismatched furniture, hero merchandise, and the lingering scent of various snacks. The students of Class 1A minus Bakugo, who was likely brooding in his room, were a diverse bunch, their personalities as varied as their quirks. Midoriya's joining us. Kirishima exclaimed, his usual enthusiastic grin in place. Awesome. More the merrier. Welcome, Midoriya-san, Yaoyorozu said politely, offering him a seat on a nearby couch. So, you're really not aiming to be a hero? Ashido Mina asked, her bright pink skin and energetic movements making her stand out. That's like totally different. Izuku settled onto the couch, his long frame making him tower slightly over some of the other students. My aspirations lie beyond the conventional framework of hero society. I seek to understand and manipulate the fundamental principles of the universe to facilitate societal progress. The conversation flowed, touching on various topics: their first day at UA, their initial impressions of the teachers, and, inevitably, Izuku's unique field of study. He fielded their questions with a calm, analytical demeanor, occasionally injecting his characteristic dry humor. So this age of science thing, Kaminari Denki said, scratching his head. Is that like robots taking over the world? A statistically improbable and culturally misinformed trope, Izuku replied dryly. The age of science implies a societal paradigm shift where rational inquiry, empirical evidence, and technological innovation are prioritized over innate, often unpredictable abilities. Suddenly, Mineta Minoru, a small student with sticky ball-like hair, piped up. Hey Midoriya. You look like you know your stuff. You play any video games? Izuku blinked, a flicker of something akin to amusement in his eyes. Video games. A digital simulation designed for entertainment. I have engaged in such activities on occasion, primarily for the analysis of human behavioral patterns and strategic decision-making under simulated pressure. Ooh, you're one of those super smart gamers, huh? Shirohanda said, grinning. We were just about to hop onto some Call of Duty. Wanna join? See how your strategic decision-making holds up against some real competition. Intrigued by the opportunity to observe human interaction in a competitive virtual environment, Izuku agreed. Soon, several students were huddled around a large screen, controllers in hand, ready to face off against the stoic scientist. What ensued was a massacre. Izuku, his analytical mind processing information at lightning speed, his reflexes honed by years of dissecting complex systems, and his understanding of spatial awareness bordering on precognitive, utterly dominated the match. Headshots, flanking maneuvers, and tactical deployments of virtual equipment were executed with cold, ruthless efficiency. The heroic students, accustomed to relying on their powerful quirks in physical combat, were left dumbfounded as their avatars were repeatedly and mercilessly eliminated. Izuku, his usual neutral expression replaced by a thin, almost predatory smirk, surveyed the digital carnage with a quiet satisfaction. Impressive efficiency, Tokoyami Fumikage croaked, his dark shadow creature echoing his astonishment. Where did that come from? Jiro Kyoka asked, her earphone jacks twitching. You were like a gaming Terminator. Izuku simply shrugged, the smirk fading. The principles of resource management, spatial awareness, and predictive analysis are applicable across various systems, both physical and virtual. The brief foray into the digital realm had left a lasting impression. The seemingly aloof scientist possessed a hidden talent for virtual warfare, a testament to his extraordinary processing power. As the initial shock wore off, the conversation shifted back to Izuku's ambitions. So this whole bringing back the age of science thing, Kirishima said, his enthusiasm returning but tinged with curiosity. What exactly does that look like? Izuku's gaze became distant, a spark of fervent passion igniting in his emerald eyes. Imagine a world where humanity's potential is not limited by the vagaries of genetics. A world where we once again strive to break the very laws of nature, not through brute force, but through understanding. He stood up, pacing the common room, his tall frame radiating an unexpected intensity. Before quirks, humanity stood on the precipice of true cosmic expansion. We were sending probes to the outer reaches of our solar system, dreaming of interstellar voyages. We had unlocked the secrets of DNA, bringing back creatures long thought extinct. The majestic dire wolf roamed the earth once more, a testament to our scientific prowess. His voice grew with fervor. Think of the possibilities. With continued scientific advancement, we could have cured diseases that plague us now. We could have engineered sustainable energy sources, eliminating our reliance on dwindling resources. We could have even perhaps brought back the dinosaurs, those magnificent titans of a bygone era, not as weapons or spectacles, but as subjects of scientific wonder. He stopped, his gaze sweeping over the awestruck faces of Class 1A, but then quirks. A fascinating biological anomaly, yes, but one that has become an intellectual and societal black hole. All our focus, all our resources, poured into these inherent abilities, while the boundless potential of scientific inquiry lies dormant. Izuku's voice dropped slightly, tinged with a hint of melancholy. A part of humanity died when quirks emerged. We became complacent. We accepted the limitations imposed by our genetics, becoming, in a sense, nature's lapdogs, relying on the gifts we were given instead of striving to overcome our natural constraints through intellect and innovation. He took a deep breath, his eyes blazing with conviction. But I will not let that spark of human ingenuity die. I will rekindle the flame of scientific discovery. I will look the gods of nature in their eyes and say, we are not content with the hand we were dealt. We will reshape our destiny through knowledge and creation. We are back. As he spoke, the lights in the common room seemed to subtly shift, casting dramatic shadows across his face, highlighting the intensity of his conviction. The students of Class 1A stared at him, a mixture of awe and bewilderment in their eyes. His words, though unconventional, resonated with a primal sense of human ambition and the longing to push beyond perceived limitations. Whoa, Kirishima breathed, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a quiet wonder. That's intense, Midoriya. So, you want to bring back dinosaurs? Ashido asked, her eyes wide with a childlike fascination. Theoretically, it is within the realm of possibility with sufficient genetic data and advanced cloning techniques, Izuku confirmed, his voice returning to its usual analytical tone. However, the ethical and ecological implications would require extensive study and debate. He then sighed, a hint of disappointment in his voice. It is regrettable that more students from the General Education Department did not see the value in the Class 1X curriculum. Imagine the collaborative potential, the diverse perspectives that could have enriched our scientific endeavors. We could talk to some of the Gen Ed students, Yaoyorozu offered thoughtfully. Explain what you're trying to do. Maybe some of them would be interested in transferring after the midterms. That would be a logically sound course of action, Izuku conceded. Disseminating information and cultivating interest are crucial first steps in any societal shift. The rest of the evening was spent with Class 1A peppering Izuku with questions, trying to grasp the full scope of his ambitious vision. He explained concepts ranging from advanced propulsion systems for space travel to the intricacies of ancient DNA sequencing, his enthusiasm for science proving surprisingly infectious. As the night wore on, the initial skepticism of the heroic students began to give way to a grudging respect for Izuku's intellect and his unwavering dedication to his goals. He was different, undeniably so, but his passion for knowledge and his vision for the future were undeniably compelling. By the time Shinso walked Izuku back to the solitary Class 1X dorm building, a silent understanding had formed between the unconventional scientist and the aspiring heroes. They might walk different paths, but perhaps, just perhaps, their futures were more intertwined than they currently realized. The age of heroes was still in full swing, but in the quiet lab of Class 1X's sole student, the blueprints for a scientific revolution were already being drawn. Chapter 8, Blueprints for Victory and Beyond. Izuku's first official class at UA was, as expected, a one-on-one session with Principal Nizu in the surprisingly cozy Class 1X homeroom. The room had been subtly rearranged overnight, with a large whiteboard now dominating one wall and various scientific models and diagrams scattered across a sturdy work table. Nizu, perched on a high stool behind the teacher's desk, beamed at Izuku. "Good morning, Midoriya-kun." I trust your first night in the Class 1X dorm was conducive to optimal rest and cognitive function. Indeed, Principal Nizu, Izuku replied, placing his notebooks on the desk. The environmental parameters were within acceptable ranges, and the absence of external auditory disturbances facilitated uninterrupted PRDS of intellectual consolidation. Nizu chuckled. Excellent. Today we shall begin our exploration of, well, just about anything that piques your considerable intellect. Think of this as an accelerated, highly personalized curriculum tailored to your unique aspirations. We can delve into advanced theoretical physics one moment, explore the intricacies of bioengineering the next, and perhaps even debate the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. And so the class commenced. It was unlike any educational experience Izuku had ever imagined. Nizu's teaching style was dynamic and engaging, seamlessly weaving together complex concepts from disparate fields. He challenged Izuku with thought-provoking questions, encouraged him to formulate his own hypotheses, and provided him with access to a wealth of resources, both physical and digital. Izuku found himself discussing the space-time continuum, the principles of genetic manipulation, and the societal impact of technological singularity, all within the span of a single morning. Nizu was not merely imparting knowledge. He was fostering Izuku's intellectual curiosity and encouraging him to think beyond conventional boundaries. He recognized the young scientist's potential to reshape the world and seemed genuinely invested in nurturing that potential. As the morning drew to a close, Nizu hopped off his stool, a thoughtful expression on his face. Now, Midoriya-kun, let's talk about the upcoming UA Sports Festival. It is a significant event for all students, a showcase of their abilities and a crucial opportunity for future recognition. Izuku frowned slightly. With all due respect, Principal Nizu, the sports festival appears to be primarily geared towards heroic students, a display of their quirks and combat prowess. My focus lies elsewhere. Nizu's smile widened. Precisely. And that, my dear Midoriya-kun, is where your unique challenge lies. For the next 6 weeks, your primary project will be to conceive, design, and, to the best of your ability, construct an apparatus or utilize a scientific principle that will allow you to participate effectively, and perhaps even excel, in the various events of the sports festival. Izuku's eyes widened slightly. This was an unexpected but intriguing proposition. A scientific challenge disguised as a sporting event. You wish for me to engineer a solution to the physical demands of the sports festival? Izuku asked, his mind already beginning to whir with possibilities. Indeed. Nizu chirped. Consider it an exercise in applied science and creative problem-solving. You are not limited by the constraints of inherent abilities. Your only limit is your own ingenuity. Surprise us, Midoriya-kun. Show the world the power of human intellect. With a newfound sense of purpose, Izuku retreated to his lab after his session with Nizu. He spent the afternoon immersed in research, sketching furiously in his notebooks, and experimenting with various salvaged components. The challenge of the sports festival, initially a source of indifference, had become a fascinating scientific puzzle to be solved. By the end of the day, a preliminary design had taken shape. It was a heavily armored, bipedal exoskeleton, far more robust and weaponized than his entrance exam gear. His plans detailed integrated homing missile launchers in the shoulder pauldrons, retractable rocket boosters for enhanced mobility, and a fearsome multi-barreled chain gun mounted on one of the articulated arms. The design prioritized firepower, protection, and maneuverability, a scientific approach to overcoming physical limitations. He presented his initial schematics to Nizu the following morning. The principal's eyes gleamed with excitement as he examined the intricate details. Magnificent, Midoriya-kun. Nizu exclaimed, tapping a diagram of the chain gun with a paw. Truly magnificent. A bold and innovative approach. The heroics department will be most intrigued. Meanwhile, the students of Class 1A had been buzzing with curiosity about the enigmatic Class 1X student. They had heard rumors of his advanced intellect and his unconventional aspirations, and their encounter in the common room had only deepened their intrigue. During lunch break, a small delegation, Kirishima, Yaoyorozu, Ashido, Kaminari, and Siro, decided to seek out Izuku and learn more about his mysterious endeavors. They found him at a secluded table in the bustling cafeteria, surrounded by blueprints and scientific journals, muttering to himself as he refined his exoskeleton designs. Hey Midoriya. Kirishima called out, approaching the table with a friendly grin. What you working on? Izuku looked up, a slight frown creasing his brow at the interruption. I am currently engaged in the preliminary design phase of a project for the upcoming sports festival, as assigned by Principal Nizu. Sports festival. Ishido's eyes widened. But you're not in the hero course. What are you gonna do? Izuku gestured to the sprawling blueprints. I intend to participate scientifically. He spread out the schematics, revealing the imposing figure of his armored exoskeleton, complete with its array of weaponry. The heroic students stared at the design in a mixture of awe and disbelief. Whoa, Kaminari breathed. That's intense. What is it? It is a multifunctional, heavily armored exoskeleton designed to enhance physical capabilities and provide a strategic advantage in various competitive scenarios, Izuku explained, pointing to the different features. Integrated homing missile system for long-range target acquisition, rocket propulsion units for rapid traversal and aerial maneuvers, and a high-velocity rotary kinetic energy projector, what you might colloquially refer to as a chain gun, for close-quarters engagement. Yairosa's eyes widened in admiration. The level of detail in these schematics is remarkable, Midoriya-san. The power source, the articulation of the joints, it's all incredibly sophisticated. Efficiency and functionality are paramount, Izuku stated matter-of-factly. Unnecessary ornamentation or inefficient design elements have been eliminated. As the Class 1A students continued to examine the blueprints with fascination, a shrill, accusatory voice cut through the cafeteria clamor. There he is, the cheater. Uraraka, flanked by a couple of her Gen Ed classmates, stormed towards Izuku's table, her face a mask of fury. You, she shrieked, pointing a finger at Izuku. You still haven't given back my points. You don't deserve to be here. You probably built some kind of illegal weapon. She gestured wildly at the blueprints. See, I knew it. He's going to cheat in the sports festival too. The Class 1A students bristled, stepping protectively in front of Izuku. Lay off him, Uraraka. Kirishima growled, his hardening quirk activating slightly. He hasn't done anything to you. Yeah. Ishido chimed in, her hands emitting a faint acidic vapor. Why are you always picking on him? Uraraka ignored them, her gaze fixated on Izuku. You think you're so smart, huh? With your fancy gadgets. You're just a quirkless nobody trying to show off. Izuku sighed, a familiar wave of exasperation washing over him. Your continued emotional outbursts and baseless accusations are unproductive, Uraraka-san. My participation in the sports festival is sanctioned by the principal, and my designs adhere to the established guidelines. Furthermore, your persistent fixation on a perceived injustice from the entrance exam demonstrates a significant lack of focus on your current academic pursuits. Oh, I'm lacking focus. Uraraka retorted, her voice rising in pitch. You're the one building weapons in the middle of the cafeteria. Suddenly, a figure materialized beside Uraraka, his capture weapon snaking around her torso with swift precision. Aizawa's tired eyes glared down at her. That's enough, Uraraka, he drawled, his voice dangerously low. Your incessant disruptions have become a distraction. You have detention for the rest of the afternoon. Uraraka struggled against his capture weapon, her protests growing increasingly frantic. But he dash. Aizawa simply tightened his grip and began to drag her away. Not another word. As Uraraka was hauled out of the cafeteria, still yelling about stolen points and unfair advantages, a stunned silence fell over Izuku's table. Whoa, Kaminari said finally, breaking the silence. She's really got it in for you, huh? Izuku simply shrugged, returning his attention to his blueprints. Her persistent irrationality presents an interesting case study in cognitive bias and emotional regulation. The Class 1A students exchanged bewildered glances. They were beginning to realize that Izuku Midoriya operated on a completely different wavelength. He wasn't concerned with petty squabbles or emotional outbursts. His focus remained firmly on logic, efficiency, and the pursuit of scientific advancement. The sports festival was not a stage for heroic glory in his eyes, but a challenge to be overcome with intellect and ingenuity. And his heavily armed exoskeleton was just the first step in his scientifically engineered path to victory. The age of heroes might be focused on quirks, but Izuku was determined to prove that human intellect was a force to be reckoned with, a force that could not only compete but potentially surpass the limitations of mere genetic lottery. Chapter 9. An unforeseen variable and a new hypothesis. A week had passed since Izuku unveiled his initial exoskeleton designs to Class 1A. He had been diligently working in his lab, refining the blueprints and constructing a functional, albeit somewhat fragile and underpowered, prototype of the armor and its weaponry. The homing missiles were little more than glorified firecrackers with rudimentary guidance systems. The rockets produced more smoke than move, and the chain gun fired a pathetic stream of oversized metal pellets. It was a far cry from his ambitious vision, but a crucial first step in the iterative process of scientific development. Then came an unexpected announcement from Principal Nizu. Class 1X would be joining Class 1A for a field trip to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint USJ, a state-of-the-art training facility designed for various rescue scenarios. Nizu's reasoning was characteristically cryptic, something about broadening perspectives and unforeseen learning opportunities. Izuku suspected the principal had his own unique pedagogical agenda. The bus ride to the USJ was lively. The heroic students were a boisterous bunch, their conversations filled with excited anticipation about the training exercise. Izuku, seated beside Shinso, found himself the subject of curious inquiries about his giant robot project. "So, Midoriya," Kirishima asked, leaning over the seat, "that armor you're building, is it gonna help you with, like, the rescue stuff too?" Its primary design parameters are geared towards competitive scenarios involving simulated combat, Izuku explained, adjusting his makeshift smart glasses, a clunky prototype that projected holographic displays onto the lenses. However, the principles of enhanced mobility and structural reinforcement could, theoretically, be adapted for rescue operations in hazardous environments. "Smart glasses, huh?" Mina chimed in, her antennae twitching with interest. "What can those do?" Izuku tapped the side of his glasses. Currently, this prototype integrates functionality similar to a cellular communication device, a portable data processing unit, and a rudimentary virtual reality interface. I am also in the preliminary stages of developing optical sensors for enhanced environmental analysis and real-time threat assessment. He dumbed down his explanation slightly. Basically, it's like a phone and VR goggles but as glasses. "Whoa, that's so cool," Kaminari exclaimed, his eyes wide. "Can it play games?" "Theoretically, yes," Izuku replied dryly. "However, my current priorities lie in more scientifically rigorous applications." He then elaborated on some of his other ongoing research projects, including preliminary designs for a self-contained life support system for long-duration space travel and theoretical frameworks for the construction of a space elevator or skyhook, a concept that fascinated several of the students. He explained the basic principles of orbital mechanics and tensile strength in simplified terms for Mina and Kaminari, who listened with surprisingly rapt attention. Upon arriving at the USJ, the students were greeted by the Space Hero 13, who was to oversee their rescue training. However, their lesson was abruptly interrupted by the appearance of a swirling black vortex in the center of the facility, from which a horde of villains emerged. The Warp Gate villain, Kurojiri, introduced himself and the League of Villains, their ominous presence immediately putting everyone on high alert. Kurojiri's quirk activated, teleporting most of Class 1A to various zones within the USJ, separating them into smaller groups. Aizawa, displaying his formidable combat skills, immediately engaged the remaining villains, his capture weapon lashing out with practiced precision. Izuku, who had been standing slightly apart, was not teleported. He watched as Aizawa expertly neutralized multiple opponents. However, a hulking, grotesque creature with exposed muscle tissue and multiple scars, the Nomu lumbered into the central plaza, its presence radiating an unnatural power. It moved with terrifying speed, targeting Aizawa. Before anyone could react, Izuku, his mind processing the threat with lightning speed, activated his prototype exoskeleton. It whirred and clanked as it deployed around him, the bulky armor feeling surprisingly restrictive. Ignoring its limitations, he targeted the Nomu's exposed arms with his prototype chain gun. A stream of oversized metal pellets, far less powerful than he had envisioned, slammed into the Nomu's limbs. To everyone's shock, the creature's arms were severed, falling to the ground with a wet thud. However, even more shockingly, the Nomu's severed limbs began to twitch and regenerate at an alarming rate. Shigaraki Tamura, the leader of the villains, his face covered in severed hands, spoke, his voice raspy and filled with malice. "Hero society, a festering wound that needs to be excised. A corrupt system built on lies and false idols." To the astonishment of Class 1A and the villains alike, Izuku spoke, his voice surprisingly calm amidst the chaos. "I concur with your assessment of the systemic flaws within Hero society, Shigaraki Tamura." Shigaraki's red eyes widened in surprise, his scratching fingers pausing. "You agree? The over-reliance on quirks has led to societal stagnation and a neglect of fundamental human potential," Izuku continued, his gaze fixed on Shigaraki. However, I do not believe outright destruction is the optimal solution. Progress requires innovation and a willingness to challenge existing paradigms, not simply obliterate them. He gestured towards the regenerating Nomu. Your methods are crude and lack scientific rigor. True change requires a more nuanced approach. Nuanced? Shigaraki scoffed. All might represents everything that's wrong with this world. He needs to die. Symbolism is a powerful tool, but its efficacy is limited by the underlying reality, Izuku countered. Addressing the root causes of societal discontent requires understanding and strategic intervention, not merely the removal of a figurehead. He turned his attention back to Shigaraki. Tell me, Shigaraki Tamura, what events transpired to lead you down this path? What grievances fuel your longing for destruction? Shigaraki hesitated, his scratching resuming slowly. He recounted his tragic past, the neglect, the pain, and the arrival of his sensei, who had shown him the truth of the world's cruelty. Izuku listened intently, his analytical mind piecing together the fragmented narrative. And your sensei, did he ever offer you guidance beyond simply highlighting the negative aspects of society? Did he help you process your trauma? Did he train you to utilize your quirk for constructive purposes? Shigaraki paused, his red eyes unfocused as he seemed to consider Izuku's questions for the first time. A flicker of realization crossed his face. His sensei had only nurtured his anger and resentment, never offering a path towards healing or genuine empowerment. Can someone like me still be a hero? Shigaraki whispered. The question laced with a vulnerability that surprised everyone present. A warm, genuine smile spread across Izuku's face, a smile that held none of his usual scientific detachment. It was a smile of genuine empathy and understanding. Tamura Shigaraki, I believe everyone possesses the potential for change. I can speak with Principal Nizu about establishing a villain rehabilitation program here at UA. A structured environment for understanding the root causes of villainous behavior and developing pathways towards reintegration into society. Shigaraki stared at Izuku, his scratching stopping completely. A strange sense of safety washed over him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He turned to the monstrous Nomu. Nomu, knock yourself out. To everyone's astonishment, the Nomu, as if obeying a direct command, slammed its regenerating head into the ground with tremendous force, rendering itself unconscious. Just then, Kurogiri reappeared, his swirling vortex materializing beside Shigaraki. Shigaraki Tamura, we must retreat. Shigaraki, his gaze still fixed on Izuku, shook his head. No, Kurogiri. Turn around. Kurogiri hesitated, seemingly confused by the unexpected command. When he finally turned his back, Izuku, seizing the opportunity, launched the prototype homing missiles from his exoskeleton's shoulder pauldrons. With a pathetic whiz and a small puff of smoke, the miniature projectiles slammed into Kurogiri's swirling form. The warp gate villain sputtered and collapsed, his portal dissipating. I surrender, Shigaraki said, his voice surprisingly calm. Moments later, the pro-heroes arrived, alerted by the students' distress signals. The scene that greeted them was perplexing. Aizawa was bruised but conscious, the Nomu was unconscious, Kurogiri was incapacitated, and Shigaraki stood with his hands raised in surrender, a strange, almost hopeful expression on his face, talking calmly with the quirkless student in the clunky prototype armor. Izuku quickly explained the unprecedented turn of events to a bewildered Nizu, who arrived shortly after. He detailed his conversation with Shigaraki and his proposal for a villain rehabilitation program at UA. To everyone's surprise, Nizu, after a moment of thoughtful silence, agreed. Midoriya-kun, he said, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of intrigue and approval, your unconventional approach has yielded unexpected results. A villain rehabilitation program, a fascinating hypothesis. Let us explore its potential. The first participant in this groundbreaking program was, of course, Tamura Shigaraki, who for the first time in a long time, felt a flicker of hope amidst the darkness that had consumed him. The Age of Heroes had faced a terrifying threat, but in its midst, the Age of Science had offered an alternative, a chance for understanding and perhaps even redemption. The implications were staggering, and the future of Hero Society had just taken a very unexpected turn, all thanks to the quirkless boy in the prototype armor with a knack for both scientific innovation and surprisingly effective de-escalation. Chapter 10. Repercussions and Recruitment. Following the chaotic events at the USJ, Nizu granted the students of classes 1A and 1X 2 days of respite. Izuku utilized this time in his characteristic manner, a blend of social observation and intense scientific endeavor. He visited the 1A dorm common room on a couple of occasions, engaging in surprisingly normal conversations with his classmates. He found himself explaining complex scientific concepts in layman's terms, even cracking a few, admittedly dry, jokes that occasionally elicited genuine laughter. He also ventured out onto the UA campus a few times, his keen eyes observing the layout and infrastructure, always analyzing potential applications for his scientific pursuits. However, the majority of his time was spent in his lab, tirelessly working on his sports festival armor. He had christened it the XS-1 Goliath, a name that hinted at its intended size and power. The prototype had revealed numerous design flaws and material weaknesses. He was now focusing on a more robust frame, utilizing advanced alloys he had painstakingly sourced from salvaged materials, and refining the weapon systems. The homing missiles were being redesigned for greater accuracy and explosive yield, the rocket boosters were undergoing modifications for increased move and control, and the chain gun was being upgraded to fire hardened projectiles at a significantly higher rate. When the first day back at UA arrived, Izuku spent the morning in another intensive session with Nizu. They discussed the implications of the USJ incident, the potential of his villain rehabilitation program, and the ethical considerations of his rapidly evolving sports festival project. Nizu, as always, was a fountain of insightful questions and unconventional perspectives. Izuku also dedicated a portion of his morning to practical experimentation, testing various chemical reactions in his lab, the faint scent of ozone and other byproducts occasionally wafting into the hallway. By lunchtime, Izuku decided to head to the 1A dorms to eat with his classmates. As he approached their common room, however, he found an unexpected scene unfolding. A throng of students from other classes had gathered outside the doorway, creating a bottleneck. Voices were raised in heated debate. He recognized a boisterous student with sharp teeth from Class 1B yelling, "It's not fair. Class 1A always gets all the attention. They barely survived a villain attack and everyone's fawning over them." Amidst the crowd, Izuku also spotted several general education students, their expressions a mix of resentment and curiosity. Uraraka was among them, her voice shrill with indignation. "They don't deserve to be in the hero course. That green-haired weirdo probably made a deal with the villains." Izuku sighed inwardly. The aftermath of the USJ incident had clearly stirred up interclass tensions and fueled Uraraka's irrational animosity. He decided to intervene. Stepping through the crowded doorway, his tall frame easily towering over most of the other students, Izuku addressed the Class 1B student. "With all due respect, your assessment of the situation is inaccurate. Class 1A was indeed subjected to an unforeseen and dangerous encounter. However, their survival was not solely attributed to their individual strengths. Furthermore," he turned his gaze towards the general education students, "the villains present at the USJ were demonstrably not operating at optimal capacity. There were indications of internal conflict and external manipulation that significantly impacted their strategic cohesion." He paused, his gaze settling on Uraraka. "As for your baseless accusations, Uraraka-san, they are entirely without merit and continue to detract from productive discourse." Uraraka's face flushed crimson. "See, he's acting all superior again. He probably let the villains go on purpose." Before anyone could react, Aizawa's capture weapon shot out from the 1A common room, binding Uraraka with swift efficiency. His tired voice echoed from within. "That's the third disruptive outburst this week, Uraraka. You're suspended for 3 days. Consider it an opportunity for self-reflection." He then glared at the assembled crowd. "The rest of you move along. Class 1A needs their lunch in peace." As Aizawa dragged a struggling Uraraka away, the other students, sensing his displeasure, quickly dispersed. Izuku stepped into the 1A common room, finding his classmates looking slightly bewildered by his intervention. "Thanks, Midoriya," Kirishima said, scratching the back of his head. "You kinda took the wind out of their sails. Accurate information dissemination can often mitigate unnecessary conflict," Izuku replied, taking a seat at the table. The situation at the USJ was complex and not easily reducible to simplistic narratives of heroic triumph. Later that afternoon, as Izuku was working in his lab, a hesitant knock echoed on his door. He opened it to find a small group of general education students standing in the hallway, their expressions a mix of nervousness and curiosity. "I'm Midoriya-san." One of them, a girl with short brown hair, began hesitantly. We heard what you said at the orientation and well, some of us have been thinking about that Class 1X you're in." "Indeed," Izuku replied, raising an eyebrow. "Your interest is unexpected, given the prevailing emphasis on heroics. Another student, a boy with glasses, spoke up. "We were wondering what exactly do you guys do in Class 1X? It sounds different." Izuku gestured for them to enter his lab. Their eyes widened as they took in the array of equipment, the diagrams on the walls, and the faint smell of chemicals. Class 1X is a specialized program focused on the advanced study of applied sciences and engineering, Izuku explained, gesturing around the lab. Our curriculum encompasses a broad range of disciplines, including advanced physics, chemistry, robotics, materials science, and the legal and ethical frameworks governing scientific innovation. He showed them some of his ongoing projects, including the miniaturized fusion reactor model he was tinkering with and the early prototypes of his smart glasses. He explained the underlying scientific principles in accessible language, highlighting the potential applications of their research. He then led them on a brief tour of the Class 1X dorm building, showing them the well-equipped laboratory spaces and the individual research suites. "Our objective is not to develop flashy quirks or engage in direct combat," Izuku continued. "We aim to understand the fundamental laws of the universe and to apply that knowledge to create technologies and solutions that can benefit society on a systemic level. We seek to push the boundaries of human capability through intellect and innovation, not through inherent biological advantages." He paused, looking at the group of intrigued Gen Ed students. "So, in summary, we look at the laws that nature has given us and say, thanks for the suggestions, but we got this." The students exchanged impressed glances. Izuku's passion for science and his ambitious vision were undeniably compelling. "So you're basically trying to make humans better without quirks?" the brown-haired girl asked. "To transcend the limitations imposed by our current biological state through the application of scientific understanding," Izuku clarified. "To reclaim humanity's inherent drive to explore, innovate, and ultimately to shape our own destiny." The Gen Ed students left Izuku's dorm with a newfound sense of possibility. The world of quirks might be DMNT, but the prospect of a future driven by scientific ingenuity, a future where intellect was the ultimate superpower, was undeniably alluring. The seeds of recruitment for Class 1X had been sown, and Izuku Midoriya, the lone pioneer, might soon find himself with company in his quest to usher in the age of science.